Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Kate. Today we're going to be making a brown egg Pysanky. This is Lou. She's going to supervise. Now, for this egg, I actually wanted to start with kind of an orange base color. So I've already drawn out some of my design and I'm going to dip the egg in this pumpkin dye to start out. The brown egg really lends itself to these kinds of warm colors, so I really like how this is starting out. If you saw my last video, I had hinted that I had purchased and was waiting for an electric Kiska to arrive. It's here, and I'm really excited to use it for this video today. The Kiska came with multiple size tips that range from a size 0 to a size 4. The 0 does really fine work, and the 4 is a medium-sized tip that's good for filling in larger areas. The tips are easily changed out, even when the Kiska is hot, just as long as you're careful and you use this little Allen wrench that comes along with it. Now, if you look over at the top of my plate, you can see a little black tube over there, and that's actually a piece of some spaghetti wax that I bought. I bought it thinking that I would need to use it with the electric Kiska, but if I'm being honest, I tried it out on a different egg, and I didn't think it melted quite as well or covered quite as well as the black beeswax blocks that I normally use. I also like how those blocks melt off and leave a nice sheen on the egg at the end of the process. And so if you pick up this hobby, I would just encourage you to try some different products like this and see what you prefer. My first thoughts on an electric Kiska versus the traditional type that's held into a flame is that the wax application feels a lot more even with the electric Kiska. I think it's because you get a really constant level of heat on the wax that way. I feel like that makes some cleaner lines for me, which is kind of a big deal. You may have noticed in the videos that I have an essential trimmer. It's a little less obvious with the sped up videos, but that can make it hard for me to get perfectly clean lines on my Pysanky eggs. My dad also has it, and he does some of this kind of fine artistic work as well. And we joke that when we paint, we could just hold the brush still and the trimmer does all the work for us. Even the position for holding this electric Kiska seems to help out with that, so I'm a big fan of it so far. The second thing that I noticed is that the tips are actually less likely to get clogged up in the electric Kiska. The traditional ones can get some soot from the candle in the narrowest part of the tip, so you can spend lots of time clearing the tip out if you aren't careful about how you're heating it up. I have no regrets over starting out using the traditional Kiska though. It's much less of an investment early on when you're deciding if you like working in this medium or if making Pysanky is or isn't right for you. I really enjoy this process for lots of reasons, so for me, it made some sense to invest in it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about whenever I say a traditional Kiska, check out my last video. The second color that I'm using for this egg is a dark green, and you can see on the brown egg that it actually comes out as more of this lovely olive color. Working on the brown eggs is really fun because it adds a darker base for the dye colors and it tends to give you more deep jewel tones. So for example, I did an egg last week and I only used a single color bath in a royal blue dye, but I ended up with more of a jewel tone teal color. I loved how it turned out against the warm brown of the egg showing through. Again, experiment with what you like. For this egg, I'm using a floral design, so I think the more earthy green is going to look very natural for the leaves and stems. I would say that if you're working on Pysanky with kids or pets around, just be very mindful of where you're placing your hot tools. The electric Kiska does get very hot, and I wear gloves while I'm doing this mostly because I don't want to get any oils or lotions from my hands onto the egg because it can affect the dye uptake. But it also helps keep me a little more insulated from the heat when I'm a doofus and touch the brass sections on accident or whenever I'm changing out the tips on the Kiska. I would also say that for young kiddos, this is probably not a hobby that I would recommend. There are some softer wax crowns out there that you could use to decorate an egg and still get the fun of seeing multiple dye baths, so this is still definitely something that you could adapt to do with younger family. But I'd say that older kids, maybe between 8 and 10, could start working out with the Kiski. You have hot tools, open flames, permanent dyes, and eggs that have been out of the fridge for too long, so use your best judgment for what the kiddos in your life are ready for. Now, I was lucky enough to do a lot of arts and crafts with my grandparents whenever I was growing up, and they let me have a good deal of free reign to work with big kid tools. The one time I do recall getting well in over my head, though, was whenever I had received a Bob Ross oil painting set for Christmas. Now, this is way up there in terms of the best gifts ever, and it got me started working in oil paints, but the learning curve on this one was steep, and I ended up needing a paint thinner yard bath, had clothing that was thrown away, and our basement sink was really never the same again. It was a couple of years before I worked with that Bob Ross paint kit again. And it was actually a little bit of a blow to my confidence as an aspiring young artist. So there's a good case to be made for waiting until a kiddo is ready to tackle some of the more mature art hobbies or for adapting them to be a little bit more age appropriate. Now, I had mentioned in my last video that I'm starting an Etsy shop where you can purchase these eggs, and that's still the plan, but the shop has been a little more involved to set up than I had actually anticipated. One of the biggest challenges I've come up with so far is how to actually photograph these eggs so folks could see what they're getting. And I think I have a good process in place now, but I've never really done photography in the past, and so there's been some learning on the fly happening. I also acknowledge that the lighting could be just a little bit better in these first couple videos, so I'll probably be moving my operations upstairs where there's some more natural light. Well, at least as much natural light as we can come by in February in the Pacific Northwest. I think that'll also help show off some of the colors that I'm working with a little bit better than the warm tone lights that we have downstairs. The last dye color that we're using on this egg is black. The egg did require a couple dips to get a really nice deep black going. So if you're doing this or a similar project and you decide that you don't love the color on the dye, see if soaking it a little while longer will help. And now for our wax removal process, I am just using a embossing gun to heat up the wax and then buffing it off. But you can see what I was talking about earlier with the beeswax leaving a nice sheen on the egg. And there's our brown Pysanky egg.